are you?
Hello, Studio 108 Seekers and Sages. I am here with Sanjiv Lal. He is a studio owner and a businessman, and is from somewhere in India that he's going to tell us all about. And we're just going to have a little chit chat about yoga and the different definitions and relationships and ways in which cultures embrace and express this beautiful practice that, you know, we think we love and sometimes we hate, and we do, and then we don't do, and then we do again. So what do you think? Are you ready just to like dive in and get dirty with it?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Let's do it. So Sanjiv, where would you start in terms of like just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So, you know, my history is, I was actually born in the States, but my
Okay.
parents were not. They immigrated here in the 70s. My brother and sister were born overseas. I come from like Punjab, which is like Northwest India. It's very much, you know, it's a split state in India. It's where a lot of there's half the community that's Sikh. There's a big part of the community that's Hindu, but it's a predominantly Sikh state. And so there's some differences in like the religion in itself. So there's that. There's also a big Muslim population that's in Punjab too. So it's a pretty diverse state, unlike a lot of the other states that are in. It actually butts up against the Pakistan border. So
Interesting.
and so like backstory is like my dad was born in Pakistan, modern day Pakistan, but he was actually born in India back then when they did the migration over. But so, you know, they came here in the 70s. I was born here in Parma, Ohio, actually, like just up the street.
Cool.
And I don't know if I should say that good or bad.
It is good. It is good. Parma's all American.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, yeah,
Right.
it's just American.
So I was, that was like my start of it. And then like my mom is a really devout Hindu, you know, and so she's like into, you know, she was like one of the first people who started like her own, you know, pujas and kirtans at the house.
Wow.
And so that was like her thing with like the community that came over and, you know, kind of was just looking for a place to worship and
Right.
stuff like that. So, you know, so my personal background when that stuff happened was like, that was what I was getting kind of like, I don't know, I guess it'd be like going to like Catholic school or something like that, you know?
Right.
You know, that was my form of going to church in the beginning. And then, you know, they had a lot of what we did was, you know, it was Bhakti based yoga type of stuff. And it was like, you know, pujas, and, you know, she's a big Durga Mata person. So that was like her, like the people in the community that worshipped or practiced with her.
Excellent.
That
I
was
want to
what it
stop
was.
and get a couple
Sorry.
of those vocabulary things for people.
Oh, sorry.
So he said it was like a bhakti experience, and bhakti is devotion.
Yeah,
And there were pujas, which
Yeah.
are like devotional services,
Yep.
correct?
that's it.
And then she was a Maha Durga, and Durga is the mother goddess.
Mother
warrior.
goddess, yeah.
Okay.
You know, she's the lion with, you know, the a lot of arms. It's 8, like 9 or 8 or 11 arms, you know. So,
Yeah, and
depends
she's
on
a
the
fierce
picture.
protector.
That's right.
Yeah.
So like her story, her background story is like, I mean, you can use it as like almost modern day feminism if you'd like, but you know, her story is like either there's two ways, either like both of the holy books either say she was created from the gods to protect, to defeat the devils, or this was her plan. The other version is this was her planet and she was protecting it, you know, from the gods who were ruining it.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah, I have a little bit of a relationship with her.
Yeah.
She's comes through and really helps me through
Yeah.
some tough times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cool. And it was very empowering for her. That's, I think, the one reason my mom like jumped ship to come to the United States. She felt a responsibility to take care of her future family. So that's good. And then we did like a lot of kirtans, which are like call and response,
Yes.
which is almost like singing.
Uh-huh.
So that was like a lot of the stuff that I grew up with when it came to like yoga and like understanding of like devotional practice.
Right. And I know in the tradition of yoga, they talk about different paths of yoga. And so you would have Raj Yoga, which is like the active experiential yoga,
Mm-hmm.
and then Karma Yoga, the yoga of service,
Right.
and then Jnana Yoga, the yoga of study, and then there's Bhakti Yoga, which is like the yoga of devotion,
That's right.
which is just sometimes I might be wrong. So like, that's why I'm like hesitating, because this is what I've learned, but you don't learn it all in books. And what you know about what you learn in books is that there's different understandings. So I'm excited to have this conversation so that you can just kind of like bounce off of this and help me. But the Bhakti is really like the pinnacle of the deep personal relationship with the divine.
Yeah,
right?
100%. And in your devotion can be to different things. It doesn't have to be just, Durga or anything like that. But it's very like, some people also can call it Murti Puja, where it's like it's almost like an idol or a picture. And that's not meant to be like you're worshiping an idol or worshiping a picture, but it's supposed to bring you into the moment of that. A lot of people need an image. And so like a lot of what we knew before, like Bhakti Yoga came really about when like Bhagavad Gita came in. That's really kind of like that whole Krishna consciousness and understanding like Bhakti Yoga from a personal standpoint. But prior to that, it was like really mantra based. And so type of stuff. So that is.
And the mantra is really exciting to me because I feel like in my studies and experiences through Kundalini Yoga, the mantra is so much of a technology.
Yeah, it really is. It's a science, like its original sounds. There's universal prayers. The Gayatri mantra is that, and then there's other mantras that were created, post that, but like that's the universal one true, mantra that is said to be the first.
In the sound stream.
In the sound stream, and it has.
And just to like build a bridge to people that maybe aren't of this tradition, but can understand that there's a universality.
Yeah.
It's universal. It's like even in the Bible that people quote, in the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God, and like the Word is God, and the Word is the mantra of the Word, right? And so like this idea that sound can be source is really not as foreign as sometimes we think it is. No,
it's not. I mean, we think about hymns and how they help us. There's songs. They're meant to be spaced the way that they're spaced. It's supposed to be creating a rhythm in your voice and how you're doing it. It's supposed to get into the mindset of like where you're focusing on what you're saying, and that vibration that you're putting out there is coming back into your brain. So it's kind of cool.
And you get that channel for yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
As your own body instrument becomes that.
100%.
That channel. I love that. We got so far off track, but wasn't
it?
I love it. Okay. So take us back to how you grew up and what kind of experiences you had.
So
because I know you have more to say than just.
It was a unique experience. Like you grow up going. They created a temple. You go to these temples. You're coming in. I went to school here in the Cleveland area, and it was like you're very much like almost hiding that part of your life because you're like trying to integrate and so like there was an idea that like Indian people would keep their culture, the kids would keep their culture, but we were trying to integrate with Western culture. That kind of like is the this short synopsis of where we're going to be going, I think, is because I was trying to get at some point I was like, why am I learning this while everyone else is doing this,
Gotcha.
And so it was interesting. And like I appreciate my mother carrying that on throughout my entire life and not letting that go. Excuse me. And so she was able to like bring that along. We went to India every other year. We're going to these ashrams every summer, spending this time and for
God bless your little heart. It's hard to hold that precious against all of the pressures of a new society. I mean, did they know English when they came here?
Oh yeah, they were formally educated, and most people are they learn English and Hindi in their state language, so they know 3 languages technically, and so they were very well versed, but they were very close to the culture, and so she would take us back and forth and do this, and for me at the time I was like, maybe this is a punishment, like I'm spending I don't know, she's getting free babysitting, sending you to these places, but then like you go to school and then you do these things and you realize like what you take from it is a lot, and what's funny is like kind of like the 180 is a lot of like Western culture is seeking what you are learning, and like in reverse, so it's kind of neat, and so the idea of bringing that to the space is kind of like whole concept of like yoga in the West, you know, it's kind of
100%,
you know?
100%. I mean, I think we need it.
Yeah, 100%. Well,
So it's like a little bit horrifying to think that it might not be okay to just share it. Like, thank you for sharing it.
yeah, no, I don't
Right?
need it. It's
Because-
not ours. It's not ours.
Exactly,
It's
right?
not ours. You know, like I think the other thing is like it's not just, you know, it's yoga and like it's like one, Hinduism is a way of life. It's not really much. It's
Yeah,
not
as a
like
religion.
it's a religion as you know, and it's not a race, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so it's a way of life. I think Indians try to protect that way of life, so sometimes that comes off as isolating it,
Mhm.
versus like sharing it and expanding it. And the you know the concept of, you know, versus like Western religions is like you should expand it to more people and tell more people about it. Where Indians are like, if you want to hear about it, we'll tell you. But if you don't want to know, we're not going to tell you. You know,
Yeah,
type of thing.
yeah.
You know, so
Yeah, there isn't a lot of missionary
yeah, it's
kind
just,
of energy behind that.
right.
And when you look at a culture that was somewhat a victim of colonization, or definitely a victim of colonization, you can
Yeah.
see where it's like that wasn't a part of their culture to mission out.
Right.
So it does seem, and what we're really kind of touching on is, you know, what's been called cultural appropriation and the misuse of other cultures by people that aren't of that culture, and like, how can we really celebrate all that we have to share with each other, and how these practices can really make our lives richer.
Yeah.
So I know you've got like some thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I mean, cultural appropriation is tough for me because I you know, like I think it's an evolution versus like appropriation of like Indian culture in general. Like I think, you know, I think sometimes like Indians might be offended if they see like a tattoo of like an Om, or they have all this stuff on there. I don't think that's really cultural appropriation. I think that's just evolution of yoga and like Eastern culture coming into like Western society.
Right.
I think there is some probably pushback from people who are, you know, like they're more hardcore with what they think are their beliefs versus what is actually being practiced, you know?
Which is legit. I mean,
yeah.
people are going to have ideas and opinions and experiences all across the spectrum.
Yeah.
So I guess like I completely respect that. And I'm also really grateful that you use the word evolutionary.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the practices of the East coming into the West have been so beneficial for us in the West, like all of them.
Yeah.
Ayurveda, yoga, like
all
of it. It's been so beneficial. I want to respect that. Like I don't want to accidentally insult or misuse or misrepresent.
Yeah, but I think you're just guiding people to the right direction. There's always going to be someone who knows more and has experienced more, and the people that you're bringing into that experience are your people. And then if they decide to go above that and go deeper, that's on them, and they might move away. They might figure out something else. But that's your experience with yoga. That's what you're bringing. You know, like,
and I mean that's true for all of us for anything.
Exactly, 100%. That's true
share
for business too.
Right? Exactly. Like share who you are and how you are and what you have.
Yeah, and that'll be the draw, and that's the enticement of like yoga in the West. Is like you're taking from like an ancient culture, some like ancient ideas, practices, movements, things that have evolved over time as well, and then you're taking your own spin on those. You're trying to protect what you know, and build a foundation, and then grow it. Right. You know, so your foundation is a yoga, is, you know, yoga 108, you know, and, and then you're expanding that knowledge base on the people that come to you get to experience that.
Yeah, and I think experience is really the key, because yoga is an experience.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
So how does that kind of land in your life now? Like, what is yoga to you like now as an adult in your life?
Yeah, and so like Western yoga has been a big influence on me.
Right.
You know, so like this is like the whole concept of Western yoga is, you know, some people don't think this is how I got more back into like understanding where I was coming from. You know, like I have a daughter who's now a junior at NYU, and you're trying to connect with her and you're trying to do these things, and it was really like Western flow yoga that was like something that we did together that brought us to the next phase of our connection in life, you know.
I love that.
You know, and because she doesn't.
And Western flow yoga like, I hear how you're using that tag too, like Western flow yoga, that wasn't what mom was doing when you were growing up.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Right?
She was more stationary.
So it's like, yoga means all these different things,
Yeah.
all these different kinds of practices.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love
And you talk about, like, you know, breath of movement and practicing what you're doing, you're meditating while you're moving. It's very, it makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
And that part was like, you know, for me, she wasn't, my daughter, who was born here, second generation, isn't comfortable going to hang out and hear Sanskrit prayers at the temple and say that that's a form of yoga for her. But she was very much able to connect to like what the English translation of that is, how it fits in, like, you know, Ohio and Cleveland and Akron,
Yeah.
and that made it home for her. And that's what I think that's what it's meant to do for everyone, you know.
100%. It's a really rich tradition. I mean, like when we talk about 4 paths like that, like there's so many different ways to interact with the culture, the material, the ideas.
Yeah. And it's just, you know, it brings a lot of self-awareness, you know, to you. And the, you know, that's the other thing. We live in this like big illusionary world of whatever it is. It's a
remember that illusionary part?
Yeah. And you know, we're the, you know, yoga is the escape, whether that's yoga at your house, whether that's yoga at the studio. Sometimes it's much easier to go to the studio and
whether
feel,
it's kirtan
Yeah.
or a puja
Right.
or a vinyasa class or a meditation.
Right, exactly. So it's your form that makes it comfortable, and you need that time to give to yourself so that you can realize what's going around you is not everything that's happening, you know?
Yeah, we were talking about like, oh, all this is going on and time seems to be moving faster and all of this, you know, I didn't expect this and that. And Sanjiv said, and you know, underneath it all, it's just fine, whatever. And I love that because I was like, oh, snapshot, like that's the yoga in you. That's your practice showing up for you.
Yeah, and I think for me is, and I think for a lot of people, it's like, you know, we say illusion, but it's a real Maya that lives out in the world, and we're manifesting ourselves in this Maya, and we're trying to create, you know, this and trying to create that, and also our personal personas of like our ego, what we want ourselves to look like, what we want everyone in the world to think we are, and then, you know, like underneath it, it's, you know, it's you know, like nothing, you know, it doesn't matter. At the end, it doesn't really matter what you, all of this stuff. And so like,
it's like a playground.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just a playground.
It's where you get to manifest what you want to be. So, you know.
Yeah, you get to play here, and then, you know, time's up.
And then it's
So
gone.
you have to nurture your soul.
Yeah. Whether you lived it at this level or you lived it in here, we all end up in the same, like, either beginning or end. One of the two. So either we get to restart or we get to end it. But everything that happens in between is what it is. Yeah.
I love it.
You know, so what do you know, so I think I do worry. I'm not saying I don't worry. I don't think, you know, I think about all that stuff, but at the end of the day, you know, what control do I have over that?
And that's a really good way to sort of describe it, because I think this is why like studios can be so invaluable, and perhaps why people are starting to come back to the studios after the COVID shutdown and everything, because we need a place to remind us that at the end of the day.
And
it's like, because it is crazy out there, and it's crazy to think you're not going to think it's crazy out there. It's crazy to think that any of us can be out there unscathed by it, or walking on top of the water, or floating in the clouds. I mean, that's just not functional. You're not going to do well in life.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to have to get muddy. All right, we're out there, we're getting muddy.
100%.
What are your practices for cleaning up, for remembering, for coming back to, for anchoring in, so that you can say, yeah, all this, and yeah, and get fired up, and then take a deep breath and say, yeah, and it all means nothing, it's all fine.
Yeah,
it's all fine.
It'll all be okay.
It'll all be okay.
Yeah.
I have a neighbor who is from the southern portion of India, and you know, there was a time when I ran into him, and this was many years ago, and he said, you know, he had just lost his job, and I knew they had 2 little kids at home, and his wife was, you know, at home with the kids at that point. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's, you know, that's a rough time. And he said, it's okay. And there wasn't like a ripple in the water. you know, like he had roots in the ground. And I was like fascinated by that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, that's his practice showing up for him.
Right.
And we never had like an in-depth conversation about what his practice was like, where you've shared a little bit about the kirtan and the pujas, and that is part of that was kind of, I don't know what his definition of that practice is, what it was literally that he was doing.
Right.
But there was something there that gave him an anchor. And that's really what we all are searching for. It's like,
100%.
what is my something that's going to let me have an anchor so that I can just be okay?
Yeah.
Because,
100%.
you know, if you lose your job and you turn into a flipped out person, your chances of finding another job are very, very confusing. Like, I don't want to say they're nothing, but
Yeah.
they're just not as reliable as if you're able to like hold that space and keep your energy organized for that next opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's being
It's a
aware.
practice.
Yeah.
A practice of awareness.
A practice of awareness and understanding like these are the cycles of our lives too, you know?
Yeah.
And we're put into these places for things, and you know, it's how we deal with them. And a lot of our practice teaches us how to deal with life, you know? And so like when you're tired or when you're angry or when you're upset, like how does that affect the way you like live your life
100%.
too? And what do you hold on to? What are you able to let go? What are you able to move with? What are you able to recreate? Are you okay with destruction and there being an end to something?
Interesting, right?
And so that there can be some creation that you're having. Are you okay with being in the middle of the creation and knowing that there's going to be some finality to it? And that kind of stuff makes you feel okay.
You could be a therapist.
Oh,
I'm sitting here, I'm like, tune into that.
Yeah.
You know what he's saying? Like, that's the channel, that's a frequency. Like, I want my mind tuned into that kind of a thought, right?
Yeah.
To be okay in the middle of it, to be okay when it is destroying.
Yeah.
Like understanding that process in the heart and soul of who you are.
Right.
So the nervous system doesn't have to do all this.
Right. And it's the fear of like knowing that is like, are you afraid of like the end? Are you afraid of being in the middle? Are you afraid of not being the creator? Are you afraid of like doing this? And so, you know, if you're just a part of it and where you fit in, like your daily activities, how do they affect you, and you know, where do you end up? And so things happen to us personally, financially, all this stuff. For me, the thing is yoga brings me out of that stuff, you know, like it's a good way to reset. This is what's going on, this is what's happening. And sometimes yoga is not always like movement, you know, sometimes it's just sitting there thinking about it and understanding, like taking it back to an energy space that you feel good about, like moving forward with.
Right.
And sometimes that takes days, sometimes it takes months.
Thank you. Sometimes it does take days. 100% Sanjiv.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes days. Okay, I have a couple more things on my mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would love to hear childhood stories about India. Like, what do you remember of the culture, of the people, of the family, of the food? Like, what sticks with you?
So from like the culture standpoint, love the culture, right? So the culture it's a beautiful culture. I think it has its own stigmas and has its own drawbacks. Like even for me, like you know, like as you go there, you can see people in poverty at levels that you've never seen, and you can see wealth at levels that you've never seen.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, it actually brings you, like as you get older, you like read a book, maybe like the Siddhartha Gautama story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he gets to see the outside world. I mean, you go to India, that's what you see all levels of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the culture in itself it's a beautiful culture. Like from I think man has kind of made it worse sometimes, like with the caste system, utilization of the caste system to do things. I think that has always been a stigma for like Indians in general, but like Hinduism and the religion and like the practice itself, you know, even though it's, you know, that made it always tough for me.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there is fundamental and foundational roots that are unbelievable, and like that's the evolution. We evolved out of that place.
Gotcha.
But you know, the food amazing, the people amazing, the people are amazing. The time that I spent there, you know, it was like seeing what, like we don't see poverty at that level until you go there. You don't see wealth at that level unless you're there. And there's people, they play in between those worlds all the time, you know, and like also worship is like out in the open, very much out in the open. Everyone's doing that.
Interesting.
You know, so you're seeing people like on the street, like that's what they're doing. They're like praying. That's okay with them. They're meditating. That's what they're doing. And it is like very much everything is in your face.
Gotcha.
You know? So,
gotcha.
but you know, as a child, I came back. I would go there and then I come back here, and it's I was like kind of pulled in two different directions, you know.
Mhm.
I really wanted to, like, as a high schooler, I wanted to fit in, you know, like that was like, and so like some of like my peers that were going through the same thing I was doing, they kind of like isolated their like Western growing up, and were focused on that till they were in adulthood. I kind of like pushed back on that. I wanted to really become a part of like Western culture,
Right,
like,
right.
you know, do the thing that you see in like the movies and all that other stuff, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
be a part of that. So, you know, I got to like integrate with that part of my life very, very early on. You know, like where my sister and brother, they kind of didn't do it the same way.
They were older.
They were older.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, but like I said, it wasn't until I had a daughter until I realized, like, oh my God, we got to figure out a way to connect and get back.
Yeah.
And, you know, like she went to a private school over in the Akron area, and, you know, she's learning all about her, like this Western, like she was going to Catholic school, so she was learning all about that. But her interest was that, and then also like learning about where she came from, what was going
That's
on.
beautiful.
And
Yeah.
then it was a good conversion, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So you got to watch her kind of weave that.
yeah, and I gotta see.
And I mean, she wove it because you did, by the way.
Yeah.
Lindsay, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I would think so.
Which, like, good job, Dad.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's a beautiful reflection.
yeah,
And maybe sometimes we don't appreciate it until we see our kids doing it.
yeah, and you know, it was an opportunity for me as like to look at someone who's going through something similar that I went through on a different scale. But you know, like I was a little bit more like obviously cultured from here. My culture was here, but you know, she had experienced that. She looks different. She's
She's stunning. Okay,
yeah.
she's
You know,
absolutely stunning.
yeah.
She's
So she looks like me, and she's like going to school and doing all this stuff. But she has all of that like Western stuff, but she was still had an attachment to what was going on. But it wasn't really till she got to like 14 years old till she realized that this is she wanted a part of that as well. So
did she grow up knowing her grandmother?
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So
that's cool.
that helps, right?
It helps,
So,
it helps.
yeah.
And you have practices that you guys do in your home now too.
Yeah, so like and it's mostly at my mom's house, but she like does one every, you know, the first Saturday of every month for the, you know, for Navratri, and that's for, you know, just mother worship basically. They do a you know, either it's called a chunky, which is a shorter version on the months of like a devotional worship for you know, Mata, and that's her. She does that from like, you know, 4 to 9 o'clock, 4 to 10 o'clock at night. And then they do an all-night prayer, which is like a jagran, which actually literally means like you're staying up all night, and they pray all night, and they kind of sing and dance through all, like sing mostly, not so much dancing, but they sing out loud, and it's a group and community that's doing that.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You know, and so, and they're able to do that all night, you know, and be okay with it. So like that's her form of practice.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And she's incorporated like rec center yoga, because that's what she knows, and into like stuff that she's doing to make herself more like lucid and flexible, and
right. So she sees the physical, and she incorporates a little of that.
Yeah, and she's been out, and she's trying, you know, like I think they're trying to incorporate a lot of what the West has done at the temple. So they have it once or twice a month, where they're, you know, it's a lot of chair yoga, you know, it's movement yoga, but it's really like not strenuous.
There's a lot going on in Parma OH.
Yeah,
there's a lot of.
It's off of Ridge Road.
Yeah, off of Ridge Road.
Yeah.
Right around the corner here. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that. So we talked about Dev. Would you like to tell us anything about the Gita?
You know, for me, I honestly, like, I didn't really know a ton when I was growing up. It was like it was someone didactically telling you.
Gotcha.
Hey, this is like, it was like a lecture and discussion.
Understood. A little less of your mom's conversation.
Yeah.
It was like embedded in your home life.
Yeah.
A little bit more of a separate lesson.
Right, and it's like lecture discussion on that, and then, you know, like our form of it, when it came through, we really got to a place where it was like understanding like what devotion is, and it doesn't have to be devotion to Krishna or anything else. It's just understanding like, hey, these are the things that are happening in the world. This is like who your guide is. This is what you go through and understand. And then kind of going through that in it yourself, you know, and then relating the stories. And it's very, they're stories. Like the Arjun Krishna relationship is stories. And then those stories relate, how do you deal with life?
Exactly.
You know,
it's beautiful, full of archetype and metaphor.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking how you're explaining it, because the Bhagavad Gita is the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna.
Yeah.
And you're right, like in everything I've read, it's not about the worship of Krishna specifically, it's about God's source.
Yeah.
It's not tagged that way. And I don't know that I ever noticed that. I mean, I know it and I say it, but I never discriminated against, you're right. It's a very different way of saying, it's talking about God's source, it's not saying worship Krishna or anything specifically.
Right.
And is that why it's so universally and actually globally universally embraced?
Yeah, it's about his consciousness.
Yes.
You know, his personal consciousness, and like you try to attain that consciousness because he understands what's like, you know, where things are going, what is happening in the world. You know, that like they're in a war, he's fighting a war, and he's his guide through that war. Is kind of the concept of the Gita. And so that consciousness is what he's bringing to Arjun, who doesn't even realize that that's what he's hearing, you know?
Yes.
And then it starts to make sense.
It starts to make sense.
You know?
And the ideas that are woven through about purpose, I find really relevant these days. Like fulfilling your duty.
Yeah.
And fulfilling your purpose. And just what you're saying about how messy it all is, but underneath it all, it's all okay. So it's like the encapsulated embodiment or life application.
Yeah.
Of yoga.
100%. And it's a purpose-driven life. Like, what is the purpose?
The purpose is to go out on the battlefield and fight your way through it and have your glory and have your grit.
And take your losses and take your wins.
Take your losses, take your wins, and that's all okay.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So see how we got back there?
Yeah, that was a good loop around.
I love that because it is. I don't know. Like sometimes it almost gets redundant. Like that the ideas, the same / similar ideas are woven through. Like I see them woven through so many different cultures and so many different conversations and so many different things. They're like universal truths.
Absolutely.
So we've got like this human mind that wants to find the magic elixir or the magic key or the golden ticket. And there really isn't one. Right? So then you think, oh, you're searching and searching, and it always comes back, that loop around to, it's all messy, but it's all okay. It all starts, it all builds, it all ends and starts again. And it's all okay.
And there's balance to that, like, because there's times when it feels like it's perfect, and then the perfection fails.
And then that doesn't mean the perfection was not perfect. It was, and then it was over.
Yeah, and that cycles down.
The next thing, the next thing is happening.
Yeah, and things evolve. You know, like even yoga evolves, your personality evolves, your life evolves, and then you know what are you doing to at least make sure that evolution is okay? We get so hung up on what's happening. Like, is this it? Is this it for me? You know, and you know like that one time I did crow pose, and then it's gone, and why can't I get it back? Or like, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like sometimes like never mind crow pose. By the time you're Shavasana, it doesn't even matter what poses you did. It just doesn't anymore. It's time to the next class,
right? It's time to like go out there and practice in a different way, in a different setting, in a different pose, and
And the thing that I like about like yoga here is that it's like a combination of two. Yeah. So it's not always like, it's hard to sit in it's hard to be in a meditative state. It's hard to do that kind of stuff, especially with like the world that we live in here. You know, you don't have the opportunity to go sit under a tree and hang out for 2 weeks and think that that's going to be okay. You're moving, you're breathing, you're thinking at the same time, which is an amazing, in itself is amazing, you know, and you're doing that amongst a community of people who are, you know, similar-minded, like-minded individuals that are providing you like with their energy in their room, and you're feeling that, you're absorbing theirs, you're getting out yours,
Right.
you know,
And finding that connection underneath it all is
100%.
really a power tool for surviving these times.
Yeah,
Because if we don't have some sort of connection,
it goes away.
yeah, what is the point of any of it,
Right.
right? Then life becomes really meaningless pretty quickly.
Yeah.
We were talking about lifestyle prior to sitting here, and just about how infused into lifestyle yoga is becoming for certain people.
Yeah.
And like you can kind of see it in the cities first, because that's how things usually land.
Right. I mean, and you go to like you said, we were talking about it, you know, with the bigger cities that are out there, like they're doing yoga before they go to work. They're doing yoga after they go to work. They're doing it in between their running, or they're doing it in between their CrossFit. They're doing it in between their, you know, their cycling. It's a part. It's not in like independent practice. It's incorporated in everything that they're doing. They can do it on their lunch breaks. They get the opportunity to incorporate yoga into their life. And I think that acceleration of yoga is really where West has succeeded, because, you know, like that is the whole idea of like always having that in your body at any given moment.
100%.
You can do it, you know. Obviously if they come to the studio, great. If they're in between something, like that's an opportunity for you to break away, practice your own version of it, and then get back into whatever you're doing, you know.
Yeah.
So you know, incorporation of yoga into all aspects of our lives is like
it's really the thing.
Is the key.
And it's almost like you know, sometimes we can say there are too many yoga teachers, or there are too many yoga studios, or why is all this free stuff online when we're trying to like have a yoga business here, or vice versa. Why are you trying to charge people for yoga that it should all be free? And you know what I mean? Like there's all this conversation, but what it has actually ended up doing is peppering the culture with so many opportunities and options. I mean, like I always say, we need more yoga teachers.
Yeah,
we
more
actually
yoga
need
studios.
more yoga teachers, more yoga studios, because somehow that availability needs to be right there at the fingertips.
Absolutely.
And all the different styles and all the different ways that people can take a break from their day, find themselves, get down to there, and everything's going to be okay, kind of anchor point.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're teaching all these people how to become yogis. You go through all this. Where do they get to practice that? Where do they get to teach that?
Yeah.
You know, there can't be 100 teachers at one place where they learn. You got to. That is like the foundation of what I think good studios like yourself are doing. Like they're teaching people, and then they're expecting them to branch out. You know, create branches and like spread that way that they learn.
Yeah. And the days of like the yogis being sequestered in the ashrams, and no different than the monks and the nuns being sequestered in the what were they called? The monasteries. Yeah. Right? It's like those days we've evolved past that.
Yes.
Now we need to be like householders.
Yeah.
That's what they call it, like out in the world, right, with our practices. And that's why we're gonna have, and don't quit your day job. Come and do yoga, and then take your light into that kind of gloomy, dark place, and be the one that starts to lift that vibration and lift that environment up.
And tell people.
Bring a friend.
Yeah.
Now we're back to business. Now we're back to studio owners. Yeah. So that's a great time for me to remind you that Sanjiv is owner of Cuyahoga Falls. Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's Falls Yoga and Barre.
Falls Yoga and Barre.
Falls Yoga and Barre.
In Cuyahoga Falls.
Yeah.
So Falls Yoga and Barre in Cuyahoga Falls is a beautiful studio with some really vibrant and beautiful people. Like I could just list all my friends that you have there that make my heart so happy.
A lot of them have trained at your studio.
Some of them have trained at my studio, and then some of them are family. Yeah. And like all of it, you've got a really great team there, and you guys can go and practice there and see what's going on, because there's just a lot of good to share.
Yeah, and the thing is,
Deb doesn't teach though.
Deb doesn't teach.
When will she be done at NYU?
She'll be done at NYU next year.
One more year?
One more year. So one more fall I gotta wait for.
I love it.
Yeah, one more fall.
I love it. I have a feeling you're kind of patient about it though. Are you feeling anxious about her coming back?
No, I'm excited. You know, she'll never come. I don't think she'll come back to live. Not to live. Unfortunately, I don't think so. Maybe my hope is that she would, but you know, I think she wants to expand further out.
Yeah,
Still see more things, you know.
yeah.
Maybe there'll be a time for her to come back, but you know, I
Yeah,
don't think
her
that's
eyes are
easy.
so full of sparkle. She's gonna go
Yeah.
out and see what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. I
Thank you
appreciate you.
so much for sharing so much of yourself. It's
Yeah.
been so wonderful.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. I mean, like I said, you know, I think getting to know everyone and everyone who's in the yoga space is pretty cool.
It's
you know?
very cool,
And
right?
it's good to see where everyone comes from, you know,
Yeah,
and like the different characters who are involved in that process bring into this big community that we get to have, you know.
yeah,
So
and it's important.
yeah, 100%.
This needs to be the vibe that's really
Yeah,
solidly planted.
and be happy for other people too, for you know, like that's the other thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, Namaste, Studio 108 friends and family, and thanks for following.
Yeah.
Like, comment, share, and namaste.
Have a good day. Thank you. That was so much fun.
Was that so much fun?
Yeah.